My name is Zainab, and I'm going to be talking mostly about the pieces that are in the show, obviously, but I'm also going to talk a little bit about how I got around to making these, the process involved, what led me there, just as a quick background. A little bit about myself is that I live and work in Ottawa, and I graduated from the MFA program at Ottawa U in 2020. So right in the middle of the pandemic, I got to graduate on Zoom. So that was fun. So, you know, a lot of these projects were things I was working on during or starting, at least in the MFA. So we'll just take a look at, this is just like a little review of my work that's in the show. It consists of three main pieces. The first is Meree Betee, which is the Urdu word meaning my daughter. It's the first three embroidery pieces in the photo here. Yeah, the ones in the hoops on the wall. And then on the very back, very small, you can see there is another piece, and it's called Is It Not Enough? And the final piece is an installation in the upstairs area of the gallery with projection and fabric and on projection on sarees, which you can see a little preview sneak peek on the right over there. So just to give you an idea of how the gallery is set up and, you know, kind of worked in there with Carl and Alexia. But I'm going to talk a little bit about how I kind of started. I was more of a photo-based artist a couple of years ago, but I started making the transition towards working more with textiles. But if you notice, Personal Mythologies, it's Personal Mythologies 3, so it's a sequel, it's part of a series. So I'm going to start by talking about Personal Mythologies 1, the start of the series. So this is it's a piece made when I found a box of old slides. So before this, I was very much like, I was a photographer, I was doing portrait photography and stuff, but I just came across this old box of slides that my grandfather had taken when my family lived, or his family lived in Churchill, Manitoba. That's where they first immigrated to when they first came to Canada from India. So there was something that really, like, you know, gripped me about the slides when I first saw them. I don't know if it was kind of like this feeling of stories coming to life in the photo on the left, which is a detail from the full piece on the right. The little boy in the snowsuit is my dad. So I totally grew up with him telling stories of his adventures living in Churchill and seeing polar bears and just like playing in the snow. So it almost, to me, this ended up creating this like mythology of, you know, how our family came to be in Canada, and, you know, where part of our roots also come from. So that's where the title Personal Mythologies came from. It is this mythologizing of yours and your family's story, because his stories were always very exaggerated and fantastical. So following from that theme, I wanted to use them, but, you know, slides are kind of like one of a kind. They're super precious. And I was like, absolutely not doing anything that could potentially destroy them. So I was playing around with being able to manipulate them without necessarily, you know, doing anything physical to them. And I started stacking them up because they're transparent. And I ended up scanning them while they were stacked so that we end up with these composite images. So you can see probably in the detail, there's kind of like a secondary image where it's, you know, it's sideways. And in other ones, if you can see in the details, there's like people, but there's polar bears too. And these are just, you know, two separate images. And so this was sort of my way of almost like rebuilding or finding these narratives in these images that are almost like they're fantastical, they're made up, they're a little bit, you know, they're speculative of, you know, imagining what life was like. So that is where I started with this whole project, but it was still very much, as you can see, based in photographs, but it's when I started using found materials. So I always think of this as like the kind of the beginning of, you know, what led me to what I'm working with and working on these days. So from there, you know, I left it alone for a little while, but I came back to working again with found photographs in 2019. And these ones were, these are all photos of my maternal grandmother. And at the time, she had just started to lose her memory from, you know, the very early stages of dementia. And what was interesting, though, is that she was sort of losing her short-term memory, but she had these very, very vivid memories from her past that were coming up because of, so she was talking about all these long ago stories that I had never even heard. And a lot of people say that, oh, we hadn't heard this specific story before. So, but these were clearly, you know, these important pivotal moments, core memories in her life that were now bubbling to the surface. So hearing things that I had never, like I didn't know about her, made me want to like really go back and go through the family photo albums and kind of, again, piece together these stories that I'm hearing and try and find it through the photographs. So, you know, doing this exploration through the archive that is a family photo albums, and, you know, like people had pictures all over the place and people were texting me pictures and, you know, giving them to me in the mail because I was letting everyone know, like, oh, I'm looking for like as many pictures as you have of my grandmother when she was younger. So, you know, I ended up picking a few that, I don't know, they kind of spoke to me about different points in her life. I scanned them. Don't worry, these are not alterations on the original because those are very precious and important. They're, you know, the film is long ago lost, so that's the only thing that exists. And also with working with found objects, I kind of built, I don't want to say ethics, but like a sort of code, a way of working with them where I need to show a lot of respect to the objects. Like some of them have been around longer than I have. So the slides for one thing, and in these pieces, the photos, of course, and also the photo in the middle, the lace that's on them, these are all things that honestly, they're like older than me. They have their own histories and stories. So for all of these projects, I always try and work in like the most non-destructive way to the original item, because like, I don't really believe I have jurisdiction over it to just like do whatever I want just because it's come into my possession. So that's kind of the way I've been working with it, with like trying to have a lot of respect for the original objects and to preserve them while showcasing them. So with the photos, I wanted to sort of embroider into them because my grandmother was also a very accomplished sewist, and she was very like she made outfits and did embroidery and everything. So that was a skill that wasn't really passed down to me. I was not able to sew anything at all, but with her losing her skills, you know, I kind of felt there was almost like a panic. I'm like, wait, I just lost my chance to learn these things. So I was like, okay, I have to teach myself. So these are also like, honestly, they were just like learning, me learning how to embroider. So I kind of combine these photos of her memories, me trying to connect with her as, you know, a young woman, probably in these photos the same age or maybe even younger than I am now. And, you know, connecting through practicing something that that she herself was very good at. So I embroidered onto these copies of the images. I attached vintage lace from her own collection. And it's just a way of like exploring that side of the family history. So moving forward to the pieces in the show, this one is now not necessarily part of the Personal Mythology series, but it does come from that practice of embroidering and thinking about my connection to my family and the past, and you know, histories that I may not get to participate in, traditions that are not passed down, language. I don't really speak my, you know, the language of my parents' native language or my grandparents' native language. So dealing with all of these losses of things. So I move forward with embroidery, continuing to practice it, and also continuing to work with found objects, which is these pieces of fabric are all offcuts that were like fabric that was being used for outfits. So I find it kind of interesting that there's probably like a counterpart out in the world somewhere that someone is wearing, and then this is the other side of the coin for them. The image on the left is how they would usually be displayed all together. I kind of see them as like people in a way, and in fact, to me personally, they kind of represent me and my two sisters. So I usually display them that way, but for the show, we thought it would be really nice to break it up, because I felt that the pieces were speaking to each other. So Carl's pieces are kind of interjected in there because they're talking about a lot of the same things, which I'm sure you'll hear about in his talk. But yeah, we really felt that like aesthetically and thematically, it really worked to have them interspersed with each other. So these are part of the Meree Betee series, but each of them have their own title, and the title is just the text that is embroidered. So the first one is "My Mother Tongue is Not My Mother's Tongue," which speaks about, you know, obviously loss of language, but also, you know, what comes with, you know, breaks in communication, when, you know, you have different styles, different ways, different upbringings that lead you to communicate in different ways. And, you know, maybe sometimes feeling a little bit lost because of that. The second one is "My Mother Taught Me to Make Mac and Cheese and Biryani." So again, it's kind of thinking about my place as somebody who grew up here, but is also, you know, it does try to maintain connections to their heritage. So you kind of end up with this, you know, mishmash of cultural touch points, and, you know, it's kind of like you're not one, you're not the other, having your feet in both camps. And I just think it's funny that I think I'm good at making mac and cheese, biryani, I don't know, not so much. And the final one is called "We Share Recipes and Traumas." So all of these really are about my relationship with my mother, and, you know, how it is to recognize how that has grown and changed as I've gotten older, and, you know, go from caretaker to being friends and sharing more. So, you know, moving out and away, you start, the number one thing I would call her for was always like, how do I make this? Wait, what's the next step? Can you just write me a recipe? You know, and on the other side, though, I think that, you know, you get a lot more of a deep connection. You learn about so many things that were hard for, you know, your parents when you were younger, that you had no idea about. So sort of building that bond and that connection into something more than just, you know, a parent who takes care of their child. Something also, some of them I left unfinished because I don't know, to me, I kind of, even though I am talking, I always say like my artwork is just, it's about me. But of course I am making it so that hopefully there are other people who have connections with these things. And I kind of think of it in this way that, you know, someone else could come and pick up the needle and continue it, you know, can push their own story into the piece as well. And they can continue, I've outlined the text there, they can continue in that route, or they can, you know, potentially change it. So like the tools are there, the needle is there, you can do what you want. And also because maybe I wasn't personally finished working through and thinking through these pieces. Like I considered them to be a bit of a meditation, that sort of act of repeatedly stitching is a single phrase that kind of just repeats in your head over and over again. And to me, it was kind of like a meditation on my own experiences. So these three pieces were part of a bigger piece, which is that's the full thing is the Meree Betee. And that also included sound and sarees as well in a whole installation. And going from there, I knew I wanted to use the sarees. The sarees all come from my mother's personal collection, which she got from like friends and family, like all across the world. The sarees are like all different ages, all different values. There's ones that are like have real silver that are handwork, and then there's ones that are just like cheap, like a piece of cloth. So yeah, and I think they all, again, like half of them are much older than me, have been passed down. They you know, were made for specific events for specific people. So they all have their own histories and stories. So once again, I knew I wanted to use them in my work. I love them. I'm fascinated by them. And it's a gateway to learning more and to hearing stories about different people. But again, I was not interested in doing anything that could potentially destroy them. But from my previous work with text and in the other pieces, I knew I wanted to work more with text. For me, text was becoming something that really allowed me to get to the point. Sometimes I feel like with art, we're like, oh, we'll just show it visually, and then maybe your point gets lost in all of the extra stuff. And I was like, yeah, sometimes I just have something and I want to say it, but I want to say it beautifully, and, you know, with art. So I knew I wanted to work with text. I knew I wanted to work with sarees, and I started sort of experimenting in my studio with projection. I thought about lots of different things, but I eventually came to projecting on the saree, using it as a screen. And then I noticed in the first picture, you can see when I projected, the saree is sheer enough that it went through and showed up on the wall. And I was like, well, that's interesting. And then I set up several rows, and I was like, oh, even after 3 sets, it still goes through and shows up on the wall. So that's where the first parts of the last project, the Personal Mythologies 3, so coming back around to the Personal Mythologies, comes into play. And the reason that the Personal Mythologies is a specific series is because they all use the family album, the family photos, as a starting point, as like an archive to a repository for content and for the basis of the piece. But in each one, they're sort of explored in different ways. And to me, I think that in each one, there's like a breaking down of the imagery. So I started working on the Personal Mythologies 3 project. And this is an installation that honestly, it changes with every place that it's in. So I've done it several times, but it is never the same installation twice. So this is the very first time I ever did it in 2019. And it was just the sarees and the projection. And the projections, I was kind of debating on what I wanted to talk about in the text. There were 2 sort of streams of consciousness happening at once. One was that I was talking about the family album. So it was a description. All I did is, instead of showing the photo, I had a literal description of what the photo was. It would say something, a photo of my grandmother, you know, sitting in a car. So there was the literal description of the photos. On the other side, I was thinking about my place in the art world, because at this time I was in the MFA, and obviously I was questioning everything in life. That's what the MFA will do to you, questioning my place and if I should even make art or quit it all. So there was a lot of self-conscious musings, I guess, about, you know, what am I doing? And also, as I was stepping into using a lot of, like, I get heavily cultural items, you know, I was asking myself, like, am I playing into this or not? So anyways, this is the second version of the installation. And in this one, I leaned a lot more into the photos. And I had a sort of back and forth of both the description of the photo and a story of the photo played in two opposing projectors. That's the other thing, is that I thought that, you know, I could have two projectors, and on each side you'll see the message clearly, and in the middle they kind of meet to make a, you know, mishmash of words that kind of meld, and all the letters are overlapping on top of each other. So in this one, though, I wanted it to be a bit more of an immersive installation. I bought a bunch of carpets from IKEA, and I also added sound to it. So I added the sound of a projector, like the old school projectors. Yeah, it ended up being a place that people could just sit and spend as much time as they want, like be comfortable. And a lot of people, like, they told me that, like, oh yeah, I come here and nap and stuff like that, because it was just really like calming. You have this white noise in the background. So I really enjoyed that aspect of this installation. So for the third iteration, this is at the OAG, and in this one, I had to revamp it quite a bit, because first of all, it needed to be COVID friendly, and the last one where people just sit and stay in an installation, it was not. So rather than having a space where people can hang out, I decided to make this sort of cube of sarees, and having the square in the middle allowed me to actually add more projectors. So this one has 4 projections, and that way I was able to talk about both the family photos and also you know, my thoughts about being an artist of color, a visible minority in the art world, and how I interact with institutions, and how I interact with critique as well. So we move to the final, this one, the one that is currently at Gallery 101. And I think this is actually one of my favorite versions of it. It's the space is very intimate and small, and I've got the carpets there, and you can sit and you can spend time. But I've got, what I decided to do is instead of having all 4 at once, instead the videos play one after the other. So I'm still get all 4 projections in, but we only have 2 projectors, and they kind of, you know, they once again, they go project towards each other, and you know, the projection goes all the way through all the fabrics. So I'll just show you a quick video walkthrough. Hopefully it plays. Yeah, so hopefully that gave you a little bit of an idea of how it looks, how it feels to be in it. If you, I mean, it would be amazing if you could go see it before the show closes, because I don't think the video does it justice, but hopefully for those who won't be able to see it, it gives you an idea of what it's like to walk through it. One important thing with all 3 of the carpet installations is that I always have a sign saying, asking the viewer to remove their shoes before they enter. And to me, it's kind of like this agreement that, you know, when you enter the piece, you are going to put some effort, you're going to commit to spending a little bit of time. Like once you take your shoes off, you're not going to put them back on in like 5 seconds. So, you know, when you take your shoes off, you're entering, and, you know, it's also a sign of respect. Like for us, you know, we always take our shoes off before we enter anyone's house or before we enter a mosque. So to me, it's kind of like this idea that, you know, okay, we're coming to engage, to settle in, and to, you know, pay attention, to be sincere. So the other thing is that, again, in all these things, the projection interacts with the viewers. So, you know, when you enter it, the words, you also become a screen along with the sarees. Now you're also a screen. The words are projected on you. So you become a part of the installation. So a little bit about the actual phrases now. I talked about them, but here's a few examples. So in this one, there's a description, a photo of my great grandmother wearing a blue apron and chopping onions as she looks into the distance. And on the other side, projected across, it says, oh, I put the wrong one here. It should say something else. It's actually with the next one. I see I've mixed them up. So in this one, it's a story about that previous photo, and it says, oh, grandma was the best cook. We learned all our Maharashtrian cooking from her. She taught me how to make varan. Even in her late 90s, she refused to stop cooking. I'm sure she would have continued even into her hundreds if she hadn't fallen. So this is a story about what you see in the photograph. And some of these stories are like real. I actually was, talking, and in this case, I would have been talking probably to my grandmother about, what's happening in the photo. But in other ones, like in this one, the description, is it this one? Yes, a photo, no, I'm trying to find the, yeah, in this one, it has a story about my grandfather at the beach. So it says, my grandfather, keeper of shoes and bags, he had no interest in swimming at the beach in California. A beach in California was really just a place to sit in the sand. This is a made up story that I just looked at the picture and I, sort of made a narrative about what I thought. So these are not necessarily always real and true. It's not about me and my family and exactly what's happening. I don't necessarily need people to know these things. It's more about creating the atmosphere of sharing stories that happens like when everyone gathers and they look at the family album, and they and the projector sound also in the background. I mean, people who are maybe 30 and older might remember like gathering and looking at slides on a projector, if someone goes on a trip or something and you're like, okay, everybody come and look. So this was the kind of mood, I guess, I was trying to create in there. And on the other hand, there was this self-consciousness that I often create art with. Like I said, I'm aware that I'm using, culturally loaded items and stuff like that. So these texts are sort of thinking about, am I exploiting my own culture? Am I being authentic? Does it matter if I'm authentic? So in one, it says, appropriated nostalgia is better than none. And on the other side, all of these are set up in like a call and response. So it's almost like they're talking to each other, they're having a conversation. So the other side says, but is it authentically appropriated? And another example, again, a lot of these, there's call and response. Sometimes they're like presenting opposite views. So, one side says, don't Instagram this, hashtag exhausted. And the other says, please Instagram this, hashtag exotic. So again, is it like, do I want attention, due to, being the way I present myself? Am I purposefully, presenting myself in certain ways to gain more attention? Am I being, like I said, authentic about the whole thing? So these are just like, I guess they're just things that I think about, and I thought I would present them on here as screens. So depending on when you enter this installation, you may be seeing the part that talks about the photo and the nostalgia, and then the part that questions the whole thing, as to, is this just a completely narcissistic exercise, which, I mean, most art is, but that doesn't mean it's not fun. And the final piece in this, in the show is entitled "Is It Not Enough?" And this is part of a newer series that I'm working on of textile pieces. Right now they're hangings. So these all started from when I went to India in 2021. Looking out for new materials. I was gathering things up from family and friends, but I also visited textile markets there. So these are photos from Mangaldas market, which is the biggest textile market in Bombay. It's like it's a covered market. It's like these narrow pathways and like hundreds and hundreds of these teeny tiny stalls, all these like small family owned businesses. And you can get like pretty much every kind of textile that's out there. And the thing is, like, while I was there, one thing I noticed is that their formal wear materials and shops far outweigh casual wear. Like it's all about the fancy dresses and stuff. So I purposefully went out and looked for materials that would be used in those circumstances, because when I was there, it was kind of like right in the middle of COVID. Actually, these pictures were taken literally days before a full lockdown happened in the city. So but I wanted to use them because I was like, yeah, I'm not getting any outfits made. I'm not attending any events right now. What exactly is going on? And I was told by my mother-in-law, who, you know, guided us there and took us there, that it was like, it was empty, considering like much emptier than usual. So I was like, okay, I'm going to buy everything that is needed to make a full outfit. And I'm just going to use it to like make art pieces instead. And you know, there was all kinds of specialty shops, tassels and trims, and you know, we went to a few specialty saree stores, and I got some sarees of my own, so those can start collecting their own histories eventually. We'll see. So, you know, and this guy, who was interesting, he was very nice. He was like, oh yeah, you're like my daughter, I'm gonna give you all the discounts. So it was really a fun experience. So from that, this was the first piece I've made in this series, and it's called Our Stories. The text on it says our stories cannot be unlistened to. So it was kind of thinking about this idea again of story sharing and how important that is, and how powerful, like how much of a powerful tool it can be to, you know, bring people together. Once you know someone and you know their story, like you can't deny them their humanity. You can't deny you know, you can't deny empathy. And if you do, I mean, like, it's, you know, you would be ignoring it. You can't claim ignorance on it. So that was the first in the series. And this is the second one. So this is the other one this is the last piece that is at thread counts. And it says, is it not enough to be soft? So again, this is something that I've been thinking about and ruminating on during the pandemic, when, you know, I'm at home, I'm getting a little softer, you know, the COVID-19 definitely got me. So it is thinking about like whether it's in our thought processes and our way of dealing with the world, or, you know, even our bodies themselves, you know, is there a problem with being soft? You know, and it's sort of considering self-worth in the current capitalist state, where it's not about, you know, anything. It's all about productivity. It's all about criticality and cynicism. So yeah, it's sort of questioning what I personally value too. And the piece also is kind of like asking the viewer, like I stuffed it, if you can see in the corner, the photo on the left, it's soft, so you could touch it and you could like squeeze it like a pillow. So the piece itself is soft, and it's kind of like asking, like, isn't it enough to just be this? Do I have to do anything else? Do I have to make any grand statements? Do I have to you know, hit anyone over the head with a hammer? And I also, you know, tried to sort of, I was interested in having like these organic forms that are like these pieces of ribbon are kind of like the DNA, and the trim on the edge, I was sort of thinking of like the cilia on an amoeba, and the, you know, the sort of indents on the fabric. I was like, oh, it reminds me of like when you poke dough, or like, you know, your belly button or something like that. So a lot of my pieces are always very related to the body. You know, with the projections falling on the body, or the embroidered pieces, you know, being circles like faces, with the body hanging below. So I always try to like, yeah, like relate it to living form, because, you know, again, I think the art itself becomes an object that eventually will gather its own kind of life. So I think that's it. I'm sorry if I went over time, but that's it for me. Thank you very much.